So this is the bust of the quarter scale Superman adopted son statue that I want to customize. It is a really beautiful sculpt and looks so realistic. It's obviously been inspired by Alex Ross. What I don't quite like are the eyes. I just found, I don't know if you can see in this light here, I just found them to be a little bit too slitted or too narrow. You can see he's really squinting. So in some of the paint ups I've seen, I just found that the eyes looked a little bit too beady and you couldn't really tell what was going on there. So what I want to do is open those up a bit. What I also wanted to change, I don't know if you agree or not, but I found that his jawline is a little bit too wide. It kind of reminds me of the Mr. Incredible from The Incredibles, so just want to narrow his face out a little. So the plan is to create a mold of this in silicone and then cast using a Chavant NSP, which is a wax-based clay, so I can pour that into the mold, and then I can make any tweaks that I want. This is what's remaining of my Pebeo Siligum. It's a two-part silicone putty that you knead together, and I think within 1 minute you can start applying it, and it actually gives you about a 5-minute working time before it actually cures. Quite expensive, 150 grams per pot. Cost me about 15 to 20 pounds, so quite expensive when compared to a liquid silicone that you add a catalyst to. Normally you can get maybe a kilogram of silicone for about 20 to 25 pounds, so pretty expensive. The big advantage of this is that it is really mess free. You simply knead it like putty. You can then just push it over your model that you want to duplicate, just forming a thin skin around it, and that cures in under an hour, so really fast compared to, let's say, some of the other faster curing silicones I've worked with, which can take anything up to 4 hours. So this is the actual mold that I made using the Siligum. I had to make the slit at the back so that I could actually get the original out of the mold. So really simple. I made it relatively thin. As I mentioned, I only had 300 grams, so I made it fairly thin, and I was going to then create an outer wall using plaster Paris, which I'll show you in a minute. So yeah, fairly thin. Slit at the back, which obviously will help when I've done the cast to actually then just pry that open and pull that out. So once you have your mold, the next step is to make an outer shell. The reason for the outer shells really serves two purposes. The one is obviously we have this key which is quite jagged and uneven. So when we keep it together like that, the outer shell will keep it in place and quite taut. The other thing obviously is if you were, assuming you did reseal all of that, if you're holding this in your hand, it's obviously quite flexible, so if you're pouring wax or anything into that, if it's too flexible, you're just going to distort the shape of your actual cast. So we need to make an outer shell to give it some rigid support. So this is the outer shell made from plaster Paris. This is built up using thin layers of plaster Paris bandages. So you do this in two phases. So what I did was, first did one half, added probably about 10 different layers. It's about 5-6 millimeters thick, which I hoped would be thick enough, and it turned out to be thick enough. So once that's dry, that's pretty rock hard. So it probably took a day to 2 days to dry fully. Once it was dry, I then covered that up with a bit of Vaseline, just so that the other half wouldn't stick, and then I did the same again to create the second half. So as you can see, it has a bit of a lip on it, so what that actually means is that it forms a nice casing and it clips into each other. And then obviously what you can then do is wrap that up with some sort of tape to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. And there you have the original mold, and that's what we'll be pouring our wax into.